Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a book review where I'm going to be talking about Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. So this series really came on my radar a couple months ago. The cozy fantasy genre was really picking up steam in the book community, and along with that, like cozy romance, cozy fantasy romance, especially just fantasy romance, was also hitting a big wave at the time. I think this was in part due to the hype surrounding Legends and Lattes, and people were trying to find things similar to it. And so with that big boom and that kind of media, Half a Soul also received some attention and was getting put in the recommendations for fantasy romance and cozy fantasy. And so far I would say this is one of my favorite books of the year, so I really wanted to discuss it, get some of my big feelings out about it, because I just really enjoyed it. So my reading this year has been like mixed, I would say. There have definitely not been any really bad books, but I will also say that there aren't a lot of books that I'm really loving, giving 5 out of 5 stars to, being obsessed with. One of my goals every year is always to make more review videos, but I have to have strong opinions. It's hard to make a video when you don't have a lot of feelings about books. And a lot of books this year have been in that like 3 to a little bit below 4-star rating, where I'm just like, this, you know, meh. It's not a mediocre book, but like I don't really have a lot of feelings for as to why I liked it versus loved it. And honestly, when you have like a medium rating for a book, it's not that hard to make a review for it, but you have to have things to talk about. And a lot of times I've just been ending books like, again, here, where I'm just like, yeah, it was fine, I liked it, I don't know. Not really having like a lot of constructive reasons as to why I didn't like it. But with Half a Soul, I feel like I can finally, one, talk about a book that I enjoyed, but also like I have concrete reasons as to why this worked for me. Half a Soul is a fantasy Regency romance novel. I'm not a big romance girly, but I do have a really big soft spot for Regency. I feel like the fantasy element really allowed the author to play with like the historical stuff of the novel. It allowed the author to do a lot of the things that I like about Regency, which is like propriety and rules, social rules, while also like getting to bend some stuff to, one, just make it more fantastical, but also so there's a little bit of leeway so that the novel doesn't have to fall in so closely. One of my big pet peeves of like the Regency romance genre, just like the people who created Regency a lot of times do this, but it's basically gender essentialism in your romance. It gets just like really weird. Girls do this, boys do that. Girls can't do this. Girls are meant to be this. You know, societal gender roles and just kind of disavowing, I don't know, it just like there's no wiggle room for like queerness or difference. Half a Soul I feel like was very conscious of the genre that it was in, and again used that kind of leeway that it had to extend out. So let's get more into this novel. So besides being a fantasy Regency, like what does that look like? So for this book is happening right after the Napoleonic Wars, so there's a little bit of like the historical setting, and again with that Regency, it's really using the Regency as a way to have like societal rules and expectations, which is really important for the main character and her story. So our main character is Theodora, or Dora, and as a young child, she is cursed by an elf and she has half of her soul taken away. So the magical element in the story is that there are elves. There might be other creatures as well, fae. Actually, he might be a fae lord. Anyway, you know, there's magical creatures with magical powers, but there are also some people that do possess magic in the human world. Basically, the big magical obstacle or the big magical thing in this story is that our main character is dealing with a curse where she has half a soul, she doesn't have a lot of feelings, she doesn't react the way people expect her to, and that kind of makes it difficult for her to interact with high society like she is supposed to, because she basically sees a lot of it as BS and doesn't know how to interact properly with people. So already there's like a lot of really interesting dynamics going on, a lot of interesting tensions, a lot of interesting things to work through. Dora kind of has like a Cinderella-ish story where she is kind of seen as an old maid because of her age. She's not that old, but she's seen as like an oddball and never going to be married. And her family that is taking care of her does not really care for her. Basically what spurs the beginning of the story is that her cousin, who is the one who saved her originally when they were children, is coming of age, and they decide to go to London for the London season to find her a husband. Dora's like, I need to keep my oddballness in check. I need to just help out my cousin, try and get her in a happy situation. I'm basically living for my cousin because, one, I love her, but also she's probably going to be the only one that is going to protect me in the future because my family wants to get rid of me as soon as possible. There's a lot of just like really great dynamics, tension, just stuff going on to further the story. And that's what I really like about it. It's like a fantasy romance again, but it's not so focused on the romance. Like there's a lot of other stuff going on in Dora's life, just like things around her. This, I would say, is almost like a coming of age story. It like has some of those elements of Dora coming into her own power and understanding of herself and like not backing down from who she is. It just ticks off a lot of my personal favorite boxes, like Regency, rules, regulations, society, an oddball character coming into their own power, a coming of age story, the magical, whimsical fantasy elements that kind of tie everything together. So where does the fantasy romance come into play? Basically, Dora's cousin is like, you know what, I'm so excited to go to London because I am going to get involved with the Lord Sorcerer. Dora thinks that she just kind of has like a crush on him and wants to see the Lord Sorcerer because he's like this big important sorcerer guy. But no, really he's trying to set up Dora with the sorcerer in hopes of breaking her curse. And so Dora gets involved with the Lord Sorcerer. He's like this grumpy, ill-mannered, really hates high society, and Dora is like the perfect complement to his like grumpy demeanor. And I don't mean that in a grumpy sunshine dynamic. I mean that in she just like, you know, is again not great at reacting to things, doesn't react in the way people expect or want her to. And so it's a lot of really great banter and back and forth between the two, and it's just very much like unresponsive person with grumpy person, and I think that dynamic just works so perfectly. Like she puts him in his place, she stops his BS, but she's not changing him in any way. Like it's not her sunshiny, happy demeanor that's like making him bright and a better person. That's what I like. Like they are changing each other, they are influencing each other, they're growing from each other's interactions. It's not her like attitude or happy-go-luckiness that is changing him, which really appreciate. And the other layer to the story is that there's like kind of like a mystery plot line. These children in these circumstances, in like the poorhouse workhouse kind of situation, are getting sick. The Lord Sorcerer is like, that's his main prerogative, is trying to figure out what's going on with them, and Dora kind of gets wrapped into that. There's a little bit of like a fake dating thing where Dora is interacting with different men, kind of get her ants off her back, but really she's like trying to do like this charitable work. And so again, there's all these different layers, there's all these different things that are working together in just a really harmonious way. And the way that Dora's curse, along with like the fantasy elements, this like mystery, how everything plays into each other and everything comes together is just really excellently done, in my opinion. And the biggest question I had when reading this novel, the biggest worry I had, was how they were going to deal with Dora's curse at the end of the novel. Was she going to be fixed? But as soon as this one character joined the party, he is a character that has experienced the Napoleonic War. He has a prosthetic arm. Both him and the main love interest have some like PTSD, some stuff about the war. And as soon as those characters were introduced and dealt with, I was really optimistic about how they were going to deal with Dora and her curse, and I think for the most part it was really well done. I really liked how they dealt with it, and overall, like again, there's just so many elements to this story. There's honestly, I think, a lot going on to really like lift up the romance, to make it not just a romance, to make you care about these characters. And again, I feel like everything is just harmoniously put together. Did I have qualms with this book? Yes, I did. It wasn't like a full 5 stars for me. In terms of enjoyment, it was a 5 stars, but there were some elements missing for me. Mainly, I didn't like the ending, like the epilogue, basically just the epilogue. I thought it wrapped up too much. There's a weird thing where I'm like, is this supposed to be religious? Is this supposed to be like a weird heaven thing? I don't know. But like, you know, that's just like one thing. I personally like it when authors leave it up for interpretation, but overall it's just like, those were 2 pages. I can't discount the whole book for like those 2 pages. Like it wasn't that bad. And the other thing that like made me side eye is that this is a Regency. It is centered in our world. And I feel like the author is very deliberate in how she's dealing with like ableism, how she's dealing with, you know, historical elements. And yet there's no kind of thought as to like colonialism and slavery. And like, I get it. Like what I think happened is that the author didn't want to step on anybody's toes. Colonialism, imperialism, racism, slavery, it's like not a part of the book, so why include it? With a lot of Regency romance books, it's like so displaced from one, historical accuracy, and 2, like the time period, like it does, you know, it's just very displaced from a historical moment. But with this, the author is like acknowledging things. It's being a little bit more conscious. And when you have that consciousness, it begs the question, like, what is going on with the rest of the world? Do the characters care about those things? You know, I think there's like one throwaway line about slavery, maybe. These things are begging the question, like, are these characters abolitionists? Like, because of the fantastical elements, does slavery actually exist? You know, what about Indian imperialism with Britain? Like, you know, like, what's going on? Is that happening? Like, with this kind of a novel where, again, it's not important to the plot, that's like not the thing I want to be thinking about, but when you're getting a little too close to those things, you know, it begs the question. Is there a right way for the author to deal with it in the book? I don't know. Probably not. Like, it's probably better she didn't touch on it, because any kind of like couple of throwaway lines would have been just, you know, disingenuous. But like, again, we're living in a fantastical world. I want to know how the fantastical elements change society, if they had any effect on historical events or not, and like if the characters, you know, are caring so much about social hierarchy stuff, other important issues, like how are they dealing with other historical moments? But overall, Half a Soul was just like really enjoyable. It was a really fun, quick read. Again, it just had all these elements that really just came together in a really successful way. And this is definitely one of the books this year where I'm like, I cared about the characters. I wanted to know what was going to happen to them. I felt like I really knew them and understood them and had a lot of fun with them. I wanted them to fall in love. I wanted to see their romance. I wanted to see them interacting. And like, that's how I know I really, really liked a book. That's what I'm looking for. And while I have enjoyed some other books this year, like the only other book that I really felt that kind of feeling for, where I'm like really, really invested in the characters, is Delilah Green Doesn't Care. So yeah, that's how I'm feeling about Half a Soul, why I liked it so much, why it worked so well for me. It plays into like just so many tropes and book ideas that I like, especially like Howl's Moving Castle, Ellen Enchanted, all of these like stories that were like for younger readers. It has those kind of elements, but for like an adult. But overall, it's like just really wholesome. There really is like that, I wouldn't say maybe cozy quality, but like there's, you know, there's no on-page sex scenes, so it's very like wholesome romancy. I don't know, I just have a thing for like stories about women with curses and dealing with curses, and those curses being used in a metaphorical way to show their growth and coming into power, you know, like that just really works for me. So yeah, I would say that so far Half a Soul is one of my favorite novels of the year. It was really easy to talk about, which is always a great sign, and I think a lot of other people are going to enjoy it as well, especially if any of those things that I discussed really like are some of your favorite things to read about, or just, you know, tick your boxes. And after I read the first book, I immediately bought the other two in the series. I'm that interested in this author and this world. But yeah, I think that's gonna do it for today. That is my spoiler-ish free review of Half a Soul, why I enjoyed it, why it worked, the kind of elements that I didn't like as much, but you know, hopefully this was well-rounded. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.